The silence between us felt heavier than the crystal wineglass in my hand. 10 years of marriage culminating in this moment at Bellini's, the same restaurant where I proposed. Sarah sat across from me, more beautiful than ever in her navy dress, yet somehow a complete stranger. The waiter refilled our champagne with practiced elegance, congratulating us on our milestone anniversary. I managed a tight smile while my fingers nervously traced the outline of the envelope in my jacket pocket. The divorce papers inside had taken 3 weeks to prepare but just minutes to sign. The restaurant buzzed with celebration around us, couples leaning in close, sharing intimate jokes. Sarah and I sat like islands, the table between us an ocean neither was willing to cross. When did we stop trying? When did "I love you" become something we said instead of something we felt? The candlelight caught her wedding ring as she adjusted her napkin. Soon, she wouldn't be wearing it anymore. "You look nice tonight," I said, the words falling flat between us. Small talk with my own wife, how had we come to this? Sarah looked up, momentarily surprised by the compliment. "Thank you, James." Then silence again. I remembered a time when we couldn't stop talking, staying up until 3 a.m. on weeknights, sharing dreams, fears, stupid jokes that only we understood. Now we lived like roommates, coordinating schedules, passing in hallways with polite nods. 6 months ago, she moved into the guest bedroom. For better sleep, she'd said. I didn't fight it. Maybe I should have. The waiter arrived with our appetizers, his cheerful description of the dish a stark contrast to our muted responses. I watched Sarah pick at her food, noticing how thin she'd become. Had that happened gradually? Had I been too wrapped up in my own disappointment to notice? She caught me watching and quickly looked away as if my gaze caused physical discomfort. "I think we should talk," I said finally, the words hanging between us like a death sentence. Our anniversary dinner stretched before us. 2 more courses of pretending. I couldn't do it anymore. Sarah's eyes met mine, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker there. Fear? Relief? She set down her fork carefully, arranging it perfectly parallel to her knife. Always so precise, my wife. "Yes, I think we should." Her voice was steady, controlled. I reached for the envelope, my mouth suddenly dry. This public place had been a calculated choice. She wouldn't make a scene here. The thought made me feel both tactical and terrible. The couple at the next table burst into laughter, the woman's hand affectionately covering her partner's. I couldn't remember the last time Sarah and I had touched without purpose, a brush of fingers passing the salt, an accidental bump in the hallway followed by mutual apologies. "I'm just going to use the restroom first," I said, needing a moment to collect myself. In the mirror, I hardly recognized the man staring back, eyes shadowed, mouth set in a grim line. When had I started looking so old? I splashed water on my face and pulled out my phone. 3 texts from Mike. "Did you do it yet? Remember, clean break. Call me after." Mike had been divorced twice, wore it like a badge of honor. Is this what I wanted? The papers felt like a lead weight in my pocket. The bathroom door swung open, another man entering, nodding politely. I nodded back, 2 strangers sharing a moment of masculine acknowledgement. What would he think if he knew I was about to end my marriage between the main course and dessert? I dried my hands, took a deep breath, and headed back to the table, to Sarah, to the end of an era. When I returned, Sarah was typing something on her phone. She quickly put it away, almost guiltily. More evidence, I thought bitterly. The emotional distance between us had started with her always being on her phone, declining calls when I entered the room, password protecting everything about a year ago. The signs were textbook. The waiter had delivered our main courses, steak for me, salmon for her. "I ordered you another whiskey," she said quietly. A peace offering? Or liquid courage for what she suspected was coming? I sat down heavily, the envelope now burning a hole in my pocket. "Sarah," I began, my voice lower than intended. "I've been thinking about us. About what's happened to us." She set down her fork, her food barely touched. "I know," she said, and something in her tone made me pause. Not defensive. Not angry. Just tired. Bone-deep exhausted in a way that momentarily knocked me off balance. We used to be happy, I continued, the rehearsed speech abandoning me. Do you remember? To my surprise, her eyes welled with tears. Sarah never cried, eh? Not when her father died. Not when we lost our first apartment in the flood. She was always the strong one. Of course I remember, James. Her voice barely above a whisper. I remember everything. The way she said it, like a confession, like a goodbye, steeled my resolve. I pulled out the envelope and placed it on the table between us. Clean, white, official. I think it's time we stop pretending. Her eyes fixed on the envelope, understanding immediately. No shock registered on her face. Just a small nod, as if confirming something she'd long suspected. You want a divorce. Not a question. A statement, flat and resigned. I had expected anger, perhaps relief, maybe even a scene despite the public setting. Not this quiet acceptance that somehow hurt more than anything else could have. I think it's for the best, I said, the words sounding hollow even to my own ears. We've been living separate lives for months now. Years, maybe. Sarah made no move to touch the envelope. Instead, she reached for her purse. Was she leaving? But she simply withdrew an envelope of her own, this one creased and worn as if it had been carried for some time. She placed it next to mine. I've been trying to find the right time, she said. My stomach dropped. Had she been planning to serve me divorce papers too? Was I merely beating her to the punch? The cosmic joke of it made a laugh bubble up in my throat, which I quickly suppressed. The waiter approached, sensed the tension, and retreated without a word. Smart man. Sarah pushed her envelope toward me. Open it, she said quietly. Before you say anything else, before we make this official. Please. With stiff fingers, I opened her envelope. Inside wasn't divorce papers, but medical documents. Lab reports. Doctor's notes with terms highlighted in alarming yellow, major depressive disorder. Recommended treatment plan. Possible side effects. Dates from 6 months ago. Right when everything started changing. I looked up at her, confusion replacing anger. I don't understand. Sarah's hands were trembling slightly as she folded them on the table. I was diagnosed 6 months ago. The depression had probably been there longer, but I just thought I was stressed, tired from work. When it got bad enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore, I finally saw someone. Her voice was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing someone else's life, not her own. The medication made things worse before it made things better. The side effects. She trailed off, looking away. I couldn't tell you. The restaurant continued its Friday night symphony around us, clinking glasses, bursts of laughter, the soft murmur of conversation, but at our table, time seemed suspended. Why was all I could manage? Why couldn't you tell me? Sarah's expression crumpled slightly before she regained control. Because you were already unhappy. I could see it. The way you'd come home later and later. How you stopped telling me about your day. I thought. She took a shaky breath. I thought if you knew I was broken, it would be the final straw. Broken. The word hung between us. I thought of Sarah. Strong. Capable Sarah who organized neighborhood fundraisers and ran marathons and never needed anyone's help. Thinking of herself as broken. And then when the medication started, it was worse, she continued. The fatigue, the lack of interest in everything. I couldn't bear the thought of you staying out of obligation, out of pity. I stared at the papers in my hand, the divorce papers on the table. The terrible irony was beginning to dawn on me. So you pulled away. To spare you, she finished. I moved to the guest room because I couldn't sleep and I didn't want to keep you up with my insomnia. I stopped going out because everything felt exhausting. Her voice caught. I stopped wanting to be touched because the medication killed all of that, and I couldn't bear to disappoint you more than I already was. Each revelation hit like a physical blow. All this time, I'd been constructing a narrative of abandonment, of betrayal, while she had been suffering alone, thinking she was protecting me. I thought of my own actions. The late nights at the office to avoid coming home to silence, the weekends with friends, my own withdrawal that I justified as self-protection. The phone calls, I said. The passwords. I thought my therapy sessions, she interrupted. Support group texts. Journal entries that felt too raw to share. We sat in stunned silence, the magnitude of our mutual misunderstanding settling over us like a shroud. The waiter approached cautiously. Is everything all right with your meals? Sarah gave him a tight smile. Could we just have the check, please? He nodded and disappeared. I couldn't take my eyes off her face, seeing it now with new clarity. The subtle signs of strain I'd attributed to indifference. The weight loss I'd assumed was for someone else's benefit. Why tonight? I finally asked. Why were you going to tell me tonight? She looked down at her barely touched salmon. Because I'm starting to feel better. The medication is finally working. My therapist thought. She gave a small, sad laugh. She thought our anniversary might be a good time for a fresh start. I was going to suggest counseling. She glanced at my envelope. I guess I was too late. The check arrived. I paid without looking at the amount. Neither of us mentioned dessert. The drive home was silent, but different from our usual silences, charged with unspoken questions rather than cold distance. When we entered our house, the home we'd created together over a decade, everything looked different, as if I was seeing our shared life through a new lens. Sarah headed straight upstairs while I lingered in the kitchen, suddenly remembering all the mornings I'd come down to find coffee already made, despite our growing distance. Small kindnesses I'd taken for granted, interpreting them as habit rather than effort. When she came back downstairs, she was carrying a shoebox. These are the medications, she said, setting it on the counter. Bottles of pills with complex names. A journal. Appointment cards for therapists and psychiatrists. I kept them hidden in my closet. I didn't want you to know. The evidence of her secret battle made my chest ache. And these, she pulled out her phone, showing me a screen full of text notifications. It's a support group. When I was on my phone all the time, this is what I was doing. We moved to the living room, the divorce papers and medical documents spread on the coffee table between us like opposing arguments in a debate neither of us wanted to win. I thought you'd stopped loving me, I confessed, the admission physically painful. I thought you were just waiting for the right time to leave. Sarah shook her head, tears finally spilling over. I was trying to love you the only way I could, by not dragging you down with me. I reached across the gulf between us, taking her hand for the first time in months. Her fingers were cold, fragile. Do you know what hurts the most? I asked. That we both thought we were protecting each other, and all we did was cause more pain. The clock on the mantel ticked past midnight. Our anniversary was officially over, ending not with the bang of conflict but with the whisper of recognition. What happens now? Sarah asked, her voice small in our living room that suddenly felt too large. The divorce papers seemed to glow in the dim light, a future I had been so certain of hours before. I don't know, I answered honestly. I can't unknow what you've told me. And you can't unknow what I was about to do. Sarah nodded slowly. Do you still want the divorce? The question hung in the air between us. Did I? The anger that had fueled me for months had evaporated, leaving confusion and regret in its wake. No, I said finally, but I don't know how to fix this either. Sarah wiped her eyes, her composure returning. My therapist gave me some names. Marriage counselors. Before I knew about, she gestured to the divorce papers. I made an appointment for next week, just in case you were willing to try. The hope in her voice was so fragile it made my throat tighten. I thought about how close we had come to ending everything based on assumptions and silence. I'll go, I said. Of course I'll go. Relief washed over her face, quickly replaced by caution. This won't be easy, James. I'm not suddenly cured. There will be bad days. That night, we slept in separate rooms as usual, but something had shifted. Before going upstairs, Sarah had hugged me. Brief, tentative, but real. The first embrace we'd shared in longer than I could remember. I lay awake in our bed, my bed now, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening's revelations. How had we drifted so far apart that she couldn't tell me about her illness? How had I been so quick to assume the worst? When had we stopped being partners? Morning came with awkward new awareness. We moved around each other in the kitchen like cautious dancers learning new steps. Coffee, she offered. I nodded. Thanks. Simple exchanges that now carried the weight of future possibility. I have a therapy appointment today, she said as we sat at the breakfast table. Would you want to come? Just to meet Dr. Collins? She's been wanting to meet you. The invitation was a tiny bridge across our divide. Yes, I said. I'd like that. A small smile, the first genuine one I'd seen in months, briefly lit her face. Dr. Collins's office was warm, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. Sarah sat more confidently here than she had at our anniversary dinner, I noticed. This had become her space, a safe haven during our mutual isolation. James, Dr. Collins said after introductions, I'm glad you're here. Sarah has told me a lot about you. I glanced at my wife, wondering what she had shared. The worst of me? Our slow disintegration. We don't have to do a full session today, the therapist continued. But I thought it might be helpful for you to understand Sarah's treatment plan and what recovery looks like. What followed was an education in depression, clinical terms that gave shape to the shadow that had been haunting our marriage. Sarah watched me carefully as Dr. Collins explained the chemical imbalances, the treatment approaches, the expected timeline. Many partners feel abandoned, the therapist said gently. It's common, and many people with depression pull away, believing they're protecting their loved ones. Sarah's hand crept toward mine on the sofa between us. I took it, holding on like a lifeline. The following weeks were a careful reconstruction. We began with small things. Eating dinner together again, asking about each other's days and actually listening to the answers. Sarah showed me her journal, letting me see pages of darkness I hadn't known she carried. I shared my own pain, the loneliness, the assumptions, the nights I'd spent wondering what I'd done wrong. We cried together for the first time in years. There were setbacks, days when her depression pulled her back under, when she couldn't get out of bed, when the medications needed adjustment. Days when my own hurt resurfaced, when doubt crept in, when I wondered if we could really rebuild from such a complete breakdown of communication. We kept our separate bedrooms by mutual agreement, a pressure valve releasing expectations as we relearned each other. The marriage counselor helped us establish new patterns, check-ins, honest conversations about needs and boundaries, ways to ask for space without triggering abandonment fears. 3 months after our anniversary, Sarah had a particularly bad depressive episode. I came home to find her curled on the bathroom floor, sobbing. In the past, I would have panicked, withdrawn, taken it personally. Now, I sat down beside her, not trying to fix it, just being present. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm trying so hard. I held her hand, remembering Dr. Collins's words. Depression lies. It tells the person they're a burden, that everyone would be better off without them. When Sarah was calmer, I helped her to bed, brought her tea, sat reading nearby until she fell asleep. The next morning, I found a note under my door. Thank you for staying, for seeing me at my worst and not running away. That night, for the first time in nearly 9 months, she came to our bedroom. Not for intimacy, but for closeness. We lay side by side, talking softly until we both drifted off. Felt like the first page of a new chapter. 1 year after the anniversary dinner where I almost ended our marriage, we returned to Bellini's. The same table, the same waiter who didn't recognize us. Sarah wore green this time, a color that had returned to her wardrobe as her depression receded. I still noticed the signs, the days when her smiles didn't reach her eyes, the times when she needed to retreat, but they no longer terrified me. They were just weather patterns in our shared landscape. We had learned a new language together. One of patience, of asking instead of assuming, of making space for imperfection. The divorce papers had been shredded months ago in a ceremonial act suggested by our counselor. Sarah raised her glass of champagne. To communication, she said, a hint of irony in her smile. And to second chances. I clinked my glass against hers. And to seeing each other clearly. After dinner, I reached into my jacket, an echo of the year before, and pulled out a small box. Not divorce papers this time, but a new ring to replace the wedding band that had felt like a symbol of failure. A reset, I explained as she opened it. Not forgetting the past, but building on it. 2 years have passed since that night. I almost threw away everything because I couldn't see beyond my own hurt. Depression still visits our home sometimes, an unwelcome guest we've learned to manage together. Our marriage isn't perfect, whose is? But it's authentic now in a way it never was before. We've become advocates in our community for mental health awareness, particularly in relationships. Sarah speaks to support groups about the importance of vulnerability. I talk to partners about recognizing signs they might be missing. Sometimes people ask how we survived such a near miss, how we rebuilt from such complete misunderstanding. The answer is never simple, never a neat before and after story for social media. It's daily work, conscious choice, the unglamorous practice of seeing each other even when it's easier to look away. If you're watching this and recognizing your own relationship in our story, know this: silence is never protection. Assumption is never truth. The hardest conversations are often the ones most worth having. Don't wait until you're holding divorce papers across an anniversary dinner to say what needs to be said. Like this video if our story touched you, subscribe for more real-life relationship journeys, and share this with someone who might need to hear it. Most importantly, comment below, what conversation are you avoiding right now that might change everything if you had the courage to speak up?